While the CEO husband was tangled up with his white moonlight for 3 straight days and nights, I was writhing in a hospital bed, counting the minutes until the next wave of agony from chemotherapy. But the moment I died, his mind snapped. He collapsed at my headstone, refusing food or drink, his hair turning snow-white overnight. He never guessed that the woman who'd faked her death was already wrapped in his half-brother's arms. Adrian nipped my ear and whispered, "Sister-in-law, who's better, him or me?" 01 moments before the chemo drip started, Chloe texted me a photo. A radiant, elegant beauty had her arm threaded through a heart-stoppingly handsome man beneath the crystal chandeliers of a 5-star hotel. They looked made for each other. Ugh, that filthy pig Julian flaunting it in daylight now. Serena, get over here and teach them a lesson. Chloe had no idea the disease in me was sprinting for the finish line and I was already gowned for infusion. When the doctor asked for a family signature, I'd actually considered calling Julian my husband on paper, at least. With shaking fingers I typed, "Let it go." I studied the picture, Julian's face a little thinner, hair cropped shorter. Come to think of it, he hadn't been home in ages. Since Stella walked into Vance as his executive assistant, he's been glued to her, acting as if I'd gone invisible. "Doctor, I'll sign she's my sister-in-law." Adrian's husky voice tugged me back. He kept his tone steady, trying to hide that he'd cried, but the damp corners of his eyes betrayed him. After scrawling the consent, he crouched beside the bed, closed his fingers around mine, opened his mouth, then stopped, eyes reddening, tears spilling the moment he blinked. I brushed them away and forced a grin. "Silly kid, stop the waterworks. I'm not dying today." In his wet gaze I saw only myself. "Sister-in-law, please, don't leave me." 02 I hadn't lied, the protocol wasn't high risk. Just pain. Every inch of me felt skewered by a million silver needles, the ache boring straight into bone. Alone in my private room I kept thinking, "Jordan, maybe you should clock out right now." Each time the answer came, "No. I want to live. There's still so much to do, I'm not done." Chloe and I promised we'd chase the northern lights together. I'd vowed to accompany Adrian to graduate school abroad. More important, I hadn't divorced Julian yet. When the genetic panel confirmed I'd inherited the same rare cancer, life expectancy collapsed, and I was suddenly desperate for one thing: freedom. The freedom to be buried without the words "Julian's wife" carved above my name. 2 months ago I'd asked him for a divorce petition. He pinned me to a corner and hissed, "Dream on. Jordan, I'll chain you to me for life." He lifted my chin, gently wiped my tears, then murmured again, "You can't run, don't even try." I'd known he'd never release me. Julian hated me, loathed me. Back at college graduation, proud as he was, he'd thrown away every shred of dignity, chasing my cab through sheets of rain, begging me not to leave. I'd watched him with a stone-cold face and answered, "A pauper can't give me a future." A year later the pauper resurfaced as the long-lost heir to Vance. 03 At our second meeting he hurled a marriage contract onto the table. His eyes were glacier blue. "Marry me and your mother's medical bills are covered." I asked why. He pinched my chin in contempt. "Don't flatter yourself, Jordan. Keeping you close makes it easier to torment you day and night." I signed because I wanted Mom to live longer. Her rare cancer was end stage, 300 grand wouldn't save her, but it could make her remaining days gentler. Julian never knew the illness was genetic. Years earlier I'd visited a lab for screening. The geneticist apologized, "Like my mother, I carried the marker 70% chance the disease would awaken in midlife." Back then Julian was broke, piecing together tuition with part-time gigs. I refused to drag him down, so I broke his heart. After the wedding I tried to explain, but every new tabloid photo of him with another starlet choked the words off. They arrived in endless rotation. When he tired of them, he tossed the leftovers to me so I could hear how he'd loved and then trampled them. No woman had lasted 2 months until Stella. Ridiculous as it sounds, he'd first noticed me only because my face was 4/5 a copy of Stella's. In short, I was the consolation prize. 04 freshman year, I tumbled for him when he still answered to Ellis in the library. I shamelessly trailed him everywhere. Annoyed, he finally confessed. He was in love with Stella, the broadcasting department's celebrity beauty, courted by trust fund boys far above a scholarship kid. Pure brainless infatuation, told me, they'll never happen, and I look like her, why not use that? So I chirped, since she's out of reach, want to try with me? Look, my profile, doesn't it mirror hers? He froze, then spat, lunatic. Still, I shadowed him daily. Gradually the frost melted, his gaze warmed, turned indulgent. A few months later we were a couple 4 whole years. I'd thought 4 years would erase Stella. The instant she glided into his company I knew I'd been deluded. He couldn't peel his eyes away. This time he was serious. To keep Stella untroubled, he slipped off the plain gold band my dying mother had given him, the wedding gift she'd pushed into our hands from her hospice bed. So Stella wouldn't feel threatened, he also scrapped every keepsake I'd bought him back when I survived on instant noodles and double shifts, the watch I'd saved 2 months for, the hand-stitched wallet, even the keychain that held our first photo gone. The limited edition couple bracelet I'd begged him to buy thrown away. The day I went to Vance to tell him I wanted a divorce, I spotted it at first glance, the old, dulled, lifeless bracelet lying in the trash. Julian shrugged it off. Cheap junk, good riddance. 05 The day chemotherapy ended and I was cleared to leave ST, I got a message from Stella. Just one photo and a handful of words. In the photo Julian was half naked, neck and shoulders flushed, eyes half-lidded in lazy satisfaction, sprawled across a feather-soft Grand Hotel bed for an afternoon nap. I stared at the image for a full 2 minutes, numb, before Stella lazily added, "Oops, sent to the wrong chat." After discharge I didn't go home as planned. I went straight to Vance. Stella deliberately blocked me. "Do you have an appointment to see Vance?" Without a word I spun my arm and cracked a slap across her face. A perfect scarlet print bloomed on her alabaster left cheek. She froze, tears glittering at the corners of her eyes, delicate and pitiful. "Tell him to come out, or I'll happily give the other side a matching mark." She shot me a glare, then cupped her reddening cheek and scurried into the CEO's suite. I knew she'd seize the chance to play the wronged ingenue. Moments later Stella reappeared, clinging to Julian's arm. The woman wept like rain-soaked pear blossoms, the man's face was storm-black. "What the hell are you doing?" Julian seized my wrist, growling, "Apologize. Now." I ignored him, lifted my free hand, and dealt him an answering slap. A perfect crimson print surfaced on his chiseled right cheek. Left slap, right slap, 2 faces, 2 matching marks. A match made in heaven, top tier, divine soulmates. 06 Julian's face darkened further, a thunderstorm about to break, but before he could explode I pulled the divorce petition from my bag and flung it in his face. "Julian, I want a divorce." He snatched the paper, chest heaving, breath ragged, the reflex of a man pushed past his limit. The next second the petition lay in shreds between his fingers. "Jordan, dream on," he roared. I watched his meltdown calmly. "Tear it if you like. I'll file with the court tomorrow." He erupted, fingers digging into my shoulders. "Fine, let's see you win." He was right. I had the nerve to ask for divorce, I hadn't the power to win. After Julian spoke, no lawyer in Riverdale dared take my case. Accepting meant declaring war on the entire Vance empire. Back home, I crushed the divorce petition in my fist, helpless. A divorce suit takes 3 months at best, half a year at worst, but the doctor said my body was already failing. Even after chemo I might not see another winter. I smoothed the crumpled paper, only to crumple it again, whispering to myself, I really refuse to accept this. That was when Adrian knocked. He burst in, laughing and crying at once, and hugged me tight. "Jordan, there's a cure." Overseas, a team specializing in rare genetic disorders had just announced a breakthrough life-saving surgery for my exact cancer. Success rate, 70%. I stood frozen, the words echoing like a bell. A woman marked for death now held a ticket back to life. How precious, how improbable. I stared at the wrinkled divorce petition and a thought blazed through me. If fate was gifting me a way out, I would rise from the ashes. No more Jordan the miserable doormat. I would become the woman who lived wild and free. So I gathered every ally and staged a performance for Julian. That afternoon Adrian rang his brother from St., voice shaking. "She's gone." 07 Julian stumbled through the hospital corridors, barely staying upright. He lurched into the empty room, panic in his eyes, clutching the doctor's coat. "Where is my wife? Where is she? Dance's remains have been sent for cremation. Please accept our condolences." He refused to believe, scrambling up to grab the doctor again. "You're lying. She was fine. How could she be sick?" The doctor frowned, impatient. "Dance had a rare genetic cancer. She was terminal a month ago." "As her husband, you didn't know?" Julian collapsed to his knees, shaking his head like a broken toy. "No. Impossible. She would have told me. This can't be real." "How? When did you ever look past your mistresses long enough to notice her?" Adrian appeared in the doorway, fists clenched, voice like ice. That was the day Julian heard everything. Half a year earlier, the first attack, 2 in the morning, I'd crashed to the cold tiles, forehead split and bleeding. Adrian heard the thud and rushed me to Saint. When I came to, I called Julian, needing to tell him. Stella answered. "Julian's busy. He can't talk." 3 a.m. What urgent work could keep him? I already knew. After the diagnosis I asked the doctor, "This cancer usually hits middle age. Why so soon for me?" He sighed, "Chronic despair, constant stress, genetics accelerated by grief." I laughed, bitter. Figures. Since marrying Julian I'd been a bird in a gilded cage, barred from my design studio. When the whim struck he came home to claim his marital rights, rough and merciless. When he was bored he vanished with whichever starlet held his eye, gone for nights on end. And I still wasted energy cleaning up the scandalous fallout for him. Not one day of joy in years. When he learned I'd been cremated, Julian ran like a madman to the funeral home, desperate for one last glimpse. Waiting was the urn Chloe had prepared. His hands trembled as he touched the cold bronze, tears breaking loose. "Serena said she never wanted your hands on her again." Chloe shoved him back, voice arctic. "Didn't you swear you'd make her suffer every single day? Congratulations, you got exactly what you wanted." The tall, powerful man crumpled as though the wind had been knocked from him. He didn't reach for the urn again. Eyes blood red, he only followed Chloe in silence, a ghost trailing the living. Step by step, I followed the urn from the funeral home to the cemetery. I watched as it was lowered beneath the headstone. No one knew how long he knelt before my grave that day. They only said that overnight he seemed to age 10 years, as if time had suddenly hollowed him out. The night my ashes were interred, a violent thunderstorm slammed the city. Riverdale was forced to shut down, every outgoing flight was rolled back onto the tarmac. Adrian stayed beside me in the airport hotel, his cool, clear voice gentle as he coaxed Thundershiny to sleep. It was the soundest rainy night sleep I'd had since my mother died. The same storm, though, treated Julian differently. Next morning the groundskeeper found him soaked and unconscious at the foot of my headstone. They say his body was curled around the cold granite, arms locked tight, refusing to let go. 09 Life overseas began. The life-saving surgery went smoothly, but the months afterward were still torment. For almost 4 weeks I couldn't move, I lay rigid, mesmerized by the drip-drip of the 4-pole. Luckily Adrian never left. I couldn't stomach hospital food, so he bought groceries and cooked at home. If I happened to mention a fruit even out of season, even unavailable in this country, it would appear the next day, tucked into one of his carefully packed bento boxes. He knew the ward was stifling, so he lifted me careful, reverend into a wheelchair and rolled me to the rooftop for sunshine. Each embrace felt like stored summer. Sometimes the pain clawed so deeply I gnashed my teeth until they sang. He would slide his hand under mine, knuckles prominent, and say, "If it hurts, squeeze me. Hand me some of it, and it won't hurt as much." Adrian had only turned 19, yet already he moved like a seasoned adult, competent and tireless. I ruffled his soft hair and laughed. Little punk, you really have grown up, excellent nursemaid. When he lifted his gaze, light rippled across his eyes. Then, sister-in-law, may I court you? 10 Honestly, I had sensed his feelings long ago. After all, the adoration that flooded his gaze was impossible to hide. Those 6 years of my marriage to Julian were, in another sense, 6 years of Adrian's quiet companionship. I had watched the boy grow into a man almost inch by inch. Though officially Julian's younger brother, Adrian remained the family's unwanted bastard. At 13, after his biological mother died in a car crash, his father brought the orphaned boy home to live with the legitimate heir. Julian hated him. On Adrian's first night, he ordered the kid to move into the long-vacant cottage next door. Apart from hiring a housekeeper only because the patriarch insisted, Julian never bothered again. The housekeeper was shrewd, seeing that the illegitimate son had no ally. She skimmed the food budget and fed him expired, rotting produce. When I caught her, I wanted to confront her at once. But the cautious bastard child dreaded more trouble. He looked at me, timid, astray, afraid of abandonment. Sister-in-law, don't be angry. I fired the woman anyway. Later I patted his head. Kid, come eat at my place from now on. Julian rarely came home. When he did, the house filled with frost and slammed doors. More often the mansion stood vast and silent, only me inside. Adrian's arrival finally breathed a pulse into the corridors. At first he stayed guarded, tiptoeing through every moment until one Parents' Day, when a pack of rowdy classmates humiliated him in front of the whole hall. Stop acting high and mighty, bastard. Everyone knows your mom was trash. Yeah, you reek of trash to rotting jeans. Fists clenched, Adrian stayed mute. The first lesson society had taught after his mother's death was to swallow everything. I couldn't. I walked up and slapped each loudmouth across the face. Their mothers, blind when their darlings bullied others, suddenly surged forward to scold me. I swept them with a glare. Control your brats. Whatever you say, that boy's name is Vance. After that he drew closer. I told him, when people hurt you, don't waste the pain on yourself. He dropped his eyes. What about you, sister-in-law? I smiled bitterly. Yes, in the end we were the same, he, a stray dog darting between kicks, I, a songbird battering the bars of an open cage. We huddled together, trading scraps of warmth. 11 At 16 Adrian entered high school, chronically short of cash. The Vance empire was vast, even an illegitimate son should never need to penny pinch. Yet he lived like a pauper, cramming every vacation with tutoring gigs. Only years later did I learn he had funneled every allowance into an overseas medical team, researchers studying the rare genetic cancer that would eventually spare my life. Startled, I asked, how did you know I was sick so early? He framed my face in his long fingers, eyes tender. Anything about you, I keep track of. Because he cared, after learning my mother had died of the same rare cancer, he commissioned a private investigation. He discovered the gene was hereditary and that years earlier I had taken a genetic screening, learned I carried a 70% risk, and resolved to leave Julian. See? Love notices everything. One man tracked mutations in my DNA, the other tracked scandals in the tabloids. The contrast screamed. The day I was discharged we made it official. Stray dog and caged bird, reborn in a distant country, this time giving and receiving warmth in every cell. 12 3 years abroad. Rumors of Julian filtered back. He had, by all accounts, lost his mind. After the night of that thunderstorm his sanity cracked. He visited the mansion once more, emerging even more unhinged, muttering to himself. Work became a memory, the company an abandoned toy. Day after day he clutched a brown leather-bound journal and kept vigil over my grave, whispering nonsense. He claimed he wasn't Julian but Ellis. Stella, certain I was dead and Julian's grief would fade, had assumed the seat of Vance was hers for the taking. Instead, the only time Julian showed up at headquarters was to order HR to terminate her. No one knew what transpired inside the CEO's office that afternoon. Witnesses remember only a wrenching shriek from Stella, her hands covering her face as she fled. After that, I began to hear whispers that Stella now hated Julian more than anything on earth. Later, I stumbled across a domestic article. It claimed the Vance patriarch had lost all hope in his eldest son and was grooming the mysterious younger boy who was still in graduate school abroad. Beside the piece they ran a photograph, a gaunt, nearly silver-haired man in a wrinkled, cheap shirt standing in a bitter winter wind. A plain gold band circled his finger, a dulled, rust-flecked bracelet hung from his wrist. Cradled against his chest like a treasure was a worn leather-bound journal. His eyes, sad, obsessed, were fixed on a headstone. The caption read, "The Vance heir, grieving the loss of his great love, his hair white overnight." I recognized that crumpled bargain shirt. I'd picked it out for him on our first date at a night market. I'd haggled the vendor from $299 down to $39, proud as a peacock. He'd blushed, kissed my forehead, and murmured, "My Sam, you're amazing." I recognized the diary too. Page after page held every heartbeat of our meeting, our falling in love, our splitting apart, and then my heartbreak afterward. When I moved into Julian's penthouse, I'd brought it with a stubborn, secret wish: someday he'd notice it, we'd clear the misunderstanding, we'd go back to the start. But he was always with some other woman. I slowly forgot the book existed. Only after my death did he finally find it proof our timing had always been off. 13. The third year overseas, Adrian was about to graduate. His father, watching the eldest heir slide into madness, pinned every hope on the once-ignored illegitimate son and phoned in pleas for him to come home almost daily. I, meanwhile, was studying fashion design at a private institute. A promising design studio in Riverdale offered me a position, so after long talks we booked our tickets back. The night before we left we made love as though trying to fuse our bodies. Afterward he buried his face in my neck, arms locked around me, and whispered like a child begging, "Promise you'll keep loving me." I stroked his hair again and again, gentling a frightened pup. I knew he feared the day Julian discovered our ruse. He was right. Once we landed, everything shifted. In the end the shift finished Julian and me in a way none of us saw coming. 14. Our first encounter wasn't Julian, it was his white moon Stella. 3 years had turned the once dazzling femme fatale into something almost monstrous. A thick, jagged scar cratered one whole cheek, children who glimpsed her shrieked. She fumbled a mask over what had once been her proudest asset. When she spotted me her eyes filled with blood-red shock and her fingers viced my arm. "Jordan? You're alive?" Adrian stepped between us, flung her off, and warned, "Don't touch her," voice lethal. Stella's stare flicked from him to our tightly laced hands. Suddenly she clutched her ribs and laughed shrill, demented. "Julian, oh Julian, I can't wait to see that mad dog when he hears." That day I learned her disfigurement was Julian's doing. In the Vance Tower he'd gone rabid, throttling her for coming between us. If he'd taken my call, if he'd noticed my illness, I wouldn't have left him to die alone. While he strangled her she knocked over a boiling teapot, searing half her face. "Ridiculous, your death wasn't my fault," she spat, glaring at me. "He beds half of Riverdale, I'm not the only one." I actually agreed. There would have been another Stella, another starlet, eventually. His endless affairs excused as revenge on me had already murdered us. Even after my funeral he still didn't get it. 15. Hating Julian, Stella rushed a messenger to him the instant she learned I was breathing. She wanted him to see how cheap his 3 years of mourning looked. So, 3 years later, I faced Julian again. He looked ancient, hair bleached white by grief, cheeks hollow, eyes cloudy until they fixed on me and blazed with life. He stumbled forward, arms open. "Sam, you're really alive. I knew you wouldn't leave me." I stepped back, coolly brushed non-existent dust from my coat. "Don't. You'll soil me." He froze, drenched by ice, then slowly curled his shaking hands back. Joy overrode shame, his gaze drowned in devotion. He never asked why I'd faked my death or run. He only apologized, over and over, swore there'd never been a white moon, that I'd never been anyone's stand-in. He'd claimed he liked someone else freshman year just to scare me away. But when I tilted my head and asked him with a bright smile whether my profile looked like Stella's, the few seconds he stared in a daze were the moment he truly lost his heart. In all the years after our wedding he had never genuinely loved those other women, he kept them only because their tempers and faces bore some faint resemblance to mine. His eyes rimmed red, he lifted his hand in frantic explanation. Look, I'm still wearing the plain gold band, and I didn't throw away the bracelet either. I only said those cruel things because I was upset when you asked for a divorce. He wagged his tail like a begging puppy, humbler than dust. Sam, I was wrong, I really know I was wrong. I don't want to be Julian anymore, I only want to be your Ellis. Can we please have a fresh start? But I only watched him coldly, and after a long while answered, Jordan is already dead, my name now is Vance. Z as an untamed, unbridled life. 16 Julian's entanglement with me only ended when Adrian appeared. Show some self-respect and watch your boundaries, Adrian said, circling my waist with easy intimacy, pulling me possessively against him, gaze sharp. From now on she's going to be your sister-in-law. Julian's eyes landed on Adrian's hand at my waist, his own fists clenched reflexively. Have you lost your mind? She's your sister-in-law. Years had passed since they last met, and Julian still assumed Adrian was the same timid, unwelcome illegitimate son. He tried to cow him with the elder brother tone he'd always used. He didn't realize Adrian, like me, had long since become someone else. Lost my mind? You're the crazy one here. Adrian's face darkened as he hugged me even tighter. So what if she was your sister-in-law? That's ancient history. Why are you still clinging like a lovesick fool? Open your eyes and take a good look, the man standing beside her now is me. Ridiculous heir apparent of the Vance Empire, haven't you any shame? You want to play the shameless third wheel in our marriage? After all the filthy things you did, you still dare hound her? Aren't you embarrassed? Have a little pride. This is pathetic. Adrian had never been timid by nature. In earlier years the stigma of illegitimacy had forced him to swallow every insult just to survive. A few years overseas had sharpened him further. Now he truly refused to let himself suffer the slightest wrong. I stood to one side, watching him deliver that machine gun scolding with a stern little face, and found him so adorable I couldn't help a doting smile. Julian caught that smile, and his eyes instantly flushed scarlet, jealousy verging on madness. In the end he gave a bitter laugh and all but fled in despair. 17 I saw Julian again 2 weeks later. He had reverted to his old appearance, the white hair dyed back to natural black, the suit immaculate, his complexion healthy once more. Yet beneath the expensive jacket he still wore that cheap shirt, the mismatch glaring. He said he couldn't let go, that he truly loved me. I listened and found it laughable. Julian, why keep pretending you're some tragic romantic? We ended up here because every choice we made led us to it, we have only ourselves to blame. I had believed I was doing him a kindness by leaving so he wouldn't be burdened, but my ruthlessness had only tormented him. And he, hating my coldness, had spent our marriage collecting substitutes and haunting nightclubs, until the rage gnawed at my heart and triggered my illness decades early. We had hurt each other in equal measure, we were even. These years without you, I've lived very well. If you really love me, then please set me free. Julian listened in silence. He only stood there, eyes dim, figure broken and desolate. After a long time he suddenly gave a self-mocking laugh. Sam, could you call me Ellis one more time? My steps faltered. Ellis, such a distant name. 10 years ago, when I had loved him most, that was how I addressed him. But time had worn everything away, I could no longer voice it. 18 After that day Julian truly let go and never bothered me again. Soon he returned to Vance. This time he told his father that he had no special talent and had let emotion sway him until the board had lost faith. Adrian, freshly returned from graduate school abroad, was resolute and capable the better heir. He himself would stick to his duties and support his younger brother. I thought Julian's retreat would restore order, that he and I could quietly close the book. But 3 months later a premeditated accident shattered the fragile calm. That afternoon I was waiting outside the Vance building for Adrian to pick me up when a small sedan shot toward me at full speed. Between life and death, Julian appeared from nowhere, shoved me aside with lightning reflexes, and was himself swallowed beneath the wheels, crushed again and again. Before I could even process the scene, I heard the driver's wild laughter of vengeance. It was Stella, half her face ruined, her mind unhinged. You all get to start over in glittering new lives, why should I be the only one who can't? As the police pinned her down she raved, face twisted, if that's how it is, I'll send you all to hell together. Before the ambulance arrived, Julian drew his last breath. With his final flicker of consciousness he gripped my hand, repeating my name over and over. I stood solemn, letting him hold me, my eyes sorrowful on his face. His lashes trembled, he forced a sour smile and, with all the strength he had left, spoke the one intact sentence he would ever manage again, Sam. Even now you still won't call me Ellis. 19 Stella was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, carried out immediately. Before the firing squad I visited her once in prison. With only days to live she had regained a cold calm. She gave a bitter laugh. Jordan, did you know? He always made me call him Ellis. From start to finish I was nothing but your stand-in. The only reason I lasted so long at his side was because I looked the most like you. When I came home I dreamed. It was a scene from long, long ago, buried so deep I had almost forgotten. Young, naive me curled on a sofa with Ellis. I traced his handsome brows and asked earnestly, Ellis, will you love me your whole life? He kissed my cheek and said, I will, of course I will. I pressed, no matter what happens, you'll still love me? He smiled sincerely, yes. As long as I live, I'll love you forever. When I woke I went to Julian's grave and laid a bouquet, a simple, elegant bunch of lily of the valley. Its meaning, forget the past, begin again. For him, and for myself. Several years later I married Adrian. He inherited Vance and grew steadier by the day. Following my passion, I opened an independent design studio. My days are full and busy. On a languid afternoon he rests his head in the crook of my neck as always, clingingly, adoringly wrapping his arms around me. Gentle sunlight bathes his handsome profile in warmth. I think, this is happiness and love made visible. Love conquers every obstacle, it cannot be destroyed by misunderstanding. It only ever completes and redeems us, each through the other.